The Last Stand. The cold metal walls of Outpost 47 trembled as another explosion shook the station. Commander Jack Carter gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. Red warning lights flashed across the control room. The enemy was here. The exiles are. "Commander, shields are failing," shouted Lieutenant Harris, panic clear in his voice. Jack took a deep breath. He couldn't afford fear. Not now. "Hold your ground," he ordered. "Reinforcements are coming. We just need to buy time." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. No one was coming. The Earth Defense Fleet was too far. They had sent Jack's team to defend this station at all costs, but it had been a suicide mission from the start. Outpost 47 guarded a secret, a hidden data core containing crucial information about the Xalzur. If the aliens got their hands on it, Earth would fall. A sudden boom shook the walls. The main doors exploded inward, sending metal shards flying. Black-armored Xalzur warriors stormed in, their glowing red eyes scanning the room. Jack raised his rifle. Fire. His team unleashed a hail of bullets and plasma rounds. The first wave of Xalzur fell, but more kept coming. Too many. The aliens moved with unnatural speed, their razor-sharp claws slicing through human armor. "Fall back," Jack ordered, covering his team as they retreated deeper into the station. They needed a new plan. As they ran, Captain Reynolds limped beside him, blood dripping from a wound in his side. "We can't hold them off forever." Jack's mind raced. The data core had to be protected, but their only escape route was blocked. He glanced at his wrist comm. One last option. "There's a failsafe," Jack said. "A self-destruct sequence." Reynolds' eyes widened. "You mean, blow up the station, with us still in it?" Jack clenched his jaw. "If we don't, Earth loses." Before Reynolds could respond, a deep guttural voice echoed through the hall. "Humans, surrender." Jack turned to see a towering figure standing in the doorway. General Varrock. The Xalzur warlord was larger than the others, his armor engraved with golden symbols of his victories. His eyes burned like fire. Jack aimed his rifle at the alien's head. Not happening. Varrock stepped forward, unfazed. "Your fight is over. Lay down your weapons, and I will grant you a warrior's death." Jack didn't blink. "I prefer to die on my own terms." He tapped a small button on his wrist. A red countdown appeared on the nearby screen. 5 o'clock, 4:59, 4:58. Varrock's gaze flickered to the timer. For the first time, Jack saw something strange in the alien's expression. Not anger, not hatred. Something else. "Foolish human," Varrock growled. "You would sacrifice yourself." Jack smirked. "If it means stopping you, hell yeah." Varrock stepped closer, his claws tightening into fists. "You do not understand what you are throwing away." Jack had heard enough. He turned to fire, but he never got the chance. A sharp pain exploded in his chest. Jack gasped as his own body betrayed him. He stumbled, dropping his weapon. His vision blurred as he looked down. A blade. A human blade. He turned to see Captain Reynolds, standing behind him, eyes cold. "Sorry, Jack," Reynolds said. "Orders." Jack collapsed to his knees. Betrayal. His own people had sold him out. As the station's alarm blared and the countdown ticked closer to 0, Varrock knelt before him. Instead of finishing him off, the alien studied him closely. "You do not see it yet, do you?" Varrock murmured. Jack's breathing slowed. Darkness crept into the edges of his vision. Varrock leaned in. His next words made Jack's blood turn cold. "You are not who you think you are." The last thing Jack saw before the darkness took him was Varrock's piercing red eyes, filled with something strange. Not hatred, not victory, but recognition. Then everything went black. A deal with the devil. Jack's world was darkness, a deep, suffocating void. Pain throbbed through his body, sharp and unrelenting. His chest burned where the knife had gone in. His head pulsed with a dull ache. He tried to move, but his limbs refused to obey. Then sound returned. A slow, rhythmic beeping. The faint hum of machinery. A strange, hollow echo, as if he were inside a vast chamber. Jack's eyes flickered open. The light was dim, a dull blue glow illuminating metal walls covered in alien symbols. He wasn't on Outpost 47 anymore. He was somewhere else. His arms and legs were restrained, thick metal cuffs securing him to a cold steel table. His chest was bare, covered in strange medical patches. His wound was gone. No blood, no pain, just smooth, healed skin. Panic surged through him. Where am I? Then a voice, deep, commanding, inhuman. You are awake. Jack turned his head toward the sound. A shadow loomed near the doorway. The figure stepped forward, and his stomach twisted. General Varrock. The Exalzer warlord stood in front of him, his black armor glinting under the dim light. His red eyes glowed like embers in the dark. He was taller than any human Jack had ever seen. Massive, powerful, inhumanly strong. Jack pulled against his restraints. No use. What the hell did you do to me? Jack's voice was rough, his throat dry. Varrock studied him for a moment before speaking. I saved your life. Jack laughed bitterly. You should have let me die. Varrock tilted his head. Is that what you truly want? Jack fell silent. He had been ready to die on Outpost 47, willing to sacrifice everything for the mission. But now, he was a prisoner, alone, abandoned by his own people. You were betrayed by your kind, Varrock said, his voice measured. And yet you still fight for them. Jack's jaw clenched. Why do you care? Varrock stepped closer, his heavy footsteps echoing through the chamber. Because, human, you are not like them. Jack frowned. What the hell does that mean? Varrock didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed a button on a nearby console. A holographic screen flickered to life, displaying an old recording. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The footage showed a baby, small, fragile, human. He was inside a strange glass chamber, surrounded by alien scientists. Jack's blood ran cold. What is this? He whispered. Varrock's expression didn't change. This is you. Jack's heart pounded. His mind refused to process the words. No, that's not possible. Varrock's gaze burned into him. Your people told you that you were born on Earth, that you were an ordinary human, raised to be a soldier. Jack gritted his teeth. Because it's the truth. Varrock shook his head. No, it is a lie. Jack's breath quickened. His mind screamed that it couldn't be true. But deep down, something felt wrong. He had always been different, faster, stronger, more resilient than any soldier in his unit. He had never been sick, never broken a bone despite countless battles. And his nightmares, flashes of places he had never seen, creatures he couldn't name, they had haunted him since childhood. Jack swallowed hard. Why? Why would they lie to me? Varrock's expression darkened. Because you are something they fear, a weapon they could not control. Jack shook his head. No, I fight for Earth. Varrock interrupted him. Did Earth fight for you? Silence. Jack clenched his fists. He thought of Captain Reynolds, the man who had driven a knife into his chest, the man who had betrayed him without hesitation. His own people had left him for dead. Jack forced himself to stay calm. What do you want from me? Varrock crossed his arms. A deal. Jack laughed dryly. A deal. You think I'd work with you? I think, Varrock said, stepping even closer, his presence overwhelming, that you will want the truth, and I am the only one who will give it to you. Jack stared at him. What kind of deal? Varrock leaned in slightly. The war between our species is reaching its final stage. Soon, your people will launch an attack that will wipe out my kind. Jack's eyes narrowed. That's the plan. Varrock didn't flinch. And you are the only one who can stop it. Jack snorted. Why the hell would I stop it? Varrock's eyes gleamed. Because if you do not, both of our species will be destroyed. Jack frowned. What do you mean? Varrock turned to the holographic screen and pressed another button. A new image appeared. An Earth fleet. Thousands of warships preparing for an all-out attack. But beyond them, in the darkness of space, something else moved. Jack's breath caught. It was massive, larger than anything he had ever seen. A shadow, shifting in the void. This war, Varrock said, is not what you think it is. The Talzur are not your true enemy. Jack stared at the screen. His mind spun with questions. If the Talzur weren't the real threat, then who was? Before he could ask, the ship shook violently. Sirens blared in an alien language. Varrock's expression hardened. Your people are here. Jack's pulse quickened. The Earth fleet had found them. A deep voice came through the ship's comms. Talzur vessel. Surrender the prisoner. Jack's blood went cold. They weren't coming to rescue him. They were coming to erase him. Varrock turned back to Jack. Make your choice, human. Jack stared at him. If he stayed, he would learn the truth. If he left, he would be a dead man. Everything he knew, everything he had fought for, was falling apart. He had to decide. And he had only seconds left. The forgotten past. The alarm screamed through the Talzur warship. Red warning lights flickered as the entire vessel shook under the first wave of the human fleet's assault. The metal walls trembled. The deep hum of energy weapons charging filled the air. Jack Carter sat frozen in the medical bay, his mind a battlefield of confusion and anger. Outside the ship, his own people were coming to kill him. Again. Varrock stood tall beside him, his expression unreadable. His deep red eyes flickered to the holographic screen, where Earth's warships loomed closer. The fleet was moving into an attack formation, their weapons locking onto the Talzur vessel. They won't stop, Jack said, his voice hoarse. They think I'm a traitor. Varrock gave a slow nod. Because they fear what you might become. Jack clenched his fists. What does that mean? Varrock didn't answer. Instead, he turned to a control panel and pressed a command. The restraints on Jack's wrists and ankles clicked open. Jack sprang to his feet. His first instinct was to fight. But where would he run? The humans wanted him dead. The aliens had kept him alive. For now. The ship shook again, this time harder. A distant explosion rumbled through the corridors. We are running out of time, Varrock said. If you wish to live, follow me. Jack hesitated, trusting Talzur, the very enemy he had spent his whole life fighting. But the alternative was far worse. He followed. The hidden archive. Varrock led Jack through the warship's narrow hallways. Talzur soldiers rushed past them, preparing for battle, but none stopped Jack. Some glanced at him with curiosity, others with recognition. That unsettled him. They knew him. But how? Finally, Varrock stopped before a heavily secured door. The metal was ancient, covered in deep grooves of alien symbols. This part of the ship felt different, older, colder. Varrock placed his clawed hand on the scanner. The door hissed open. Jack stepped inside, and his breath caught. The chamber was lined with floating data tablets, each glowing with lines of alien text. In the center, a large pod rested in a field of blue light. The air here felt thick, heavy, like stepping into a graveyard. Jack turned to Varrock. What is this place? Varrock's gaze remained on the pod. This is the truth your people never wanted you to find. He gestured toward the floating tablets. The symbols on them shifted, translating into human language. Jack's eyes widened as he read. Project Genesis. Subject 17. Hybridization process. 93% success rate. Human, Solzer genetic experimentation. Status. Terminated. Jack's stomach dropped. He read further. Excerpt from the research log. The subject shows signs of rapid adaptation, enhanced neural function, strength beyond baseline human levels, but emotional instability remains unpredictable. Termination ordered. Further experimentation is not advised. The risk is too great. If Subject 17 survives, he must never learn the truth. Jack's breath became shallow. Subject 17. He looked at Varrock. Tell me this is a lie. Varrock's face remained still. You already know it is not. Jack's hands shook. He gritted his teeth, forcing his mind to work through the horror clawing at him. You're saying. He swallowed hard. I was created in a lab. Varrock finally turned to face him. You were born in fire and forged in war, human. You were not supposed to survive. Jack's mind reeled. Everything, his entire life, had been a lie. The Earth government had engineered him, then discarded him when he was no longer useful. And now they were coming to finish the job. The betrayal runs deep. A sudden explosion rocked the ship, slamming Jack against the wall. Status. Varrock barked into his comm. A voice crackled back, urgent. They have breached the hull. Boarding parties inbound. Jack's heart pounded. His own people were storming the ship. He turned back to the floating tablet, his eyes scanning for more. There had to be more. Something about who he really was. Then, a name. His eyes widened. His pulse roared in his ears. Lead scientist, Dr. Evelyn Carter. Project lead, Commander Darius Reynolds. Jack froze. Reynolds, he whispered. The name of the man who stabbed him. The man who had tried to kill him. Now it all made sense. Reynolds had always known. The betrayal was deeper than he ever imagined. Jack's hands curled into fists. His vision blurred with rage. We have to move, Varrock said. Jack barely heard him. His mind was screaming. His entire life, his identity, had been stolen, and he would not let them get away with it. The battle begins. The ship trembled as Earth forces broke through. The sounds of gunfire and roaring Solzer warriors filled the corridors. Varrock handed Jack a weapon, a sleek alien rifle with glowing blue plasma coils. Jack took it without hesitation. What now? He asked. His voice was cold. Steady. Varrock bared his fangs in a grin. Now, we make them pay. Jack's grip tightened on the weapon. He wasn't human. Not fully. But maybe that was his greatest weapon. The truth revealed. The warship trembled beneath Jack's feet as another explosion shook its foundation. The Earth fleet was here, tearing through the Solzer defenses with brutal precision. His own people, the ones he had fought for, bled for, were coming to kill him. Jack gripped the alien rifle in his hands, its smooth metallic surface feeling foreign yet natural. The energy coil at its center hummed with power, waiting to be unleashed. Beside him, General Varrock stood tall, unfazed by the destruction around them. The red emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Gunfire echoed through the corridors. Solzer warriors roared in defiance as human marines breached the ship, their metallic boots pounding against the steel floors. Jack took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment he chose who he really was. The first kill. Footsteps. Close. Jack pressed himself against the wall, gripping his rifle tight. Varrock stood opposite him, claws twitching, ready to strike. The air between them was thick with tension. Then, movement. A squad of Earth Marines stormed the hallway, rifles raised. Their armor was polished, their visors glowing a dull blue. Jack recognized them. His old unit. His stomach twisted. They didn't hesitate. Q-on taked. Fire. Jack's instincts took over. He rolled forward, raising his weapon. Blue plasma surged from his rifle, cutting through the darkness. The first Marine collapsed instantly, his chest armor melting away. The others hesitated for a fraction of a second. And that was all Varrock needed. With a thunderous roar, the Excelsior general lunged. His clawed hand tore through a soldier's visor, yanking him off his feet. Another Marine turned, but Jack was already moving. He grabbed the soldier's rifle, twisted it, and slammed the butt into the man's throat. He didn't think. He just reacted. The fight lasted seconds. Then silence. The smell of burnt flesh and ozone lingered in the air. Jack stared at the bodies. His own people. His own comrades. Dead. By his hands. His grip on the rifle tightened. His mind screamed at him to feel something. Guilt, regret, anything. But all he felt was nothing. Varrock placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "Do you understand now?" Jack swallowed. "Understand what?" Varrock's voice was deep, almost sympathetic. "That you are no longer one of them." Jack's jaw clenched. He wanted to argue. Wanted to say that he was still human. But after everything he had learned, after everything they had done to him, was that even true anymore? Revelation in the core. They moved fast. The ship was falling apart around them. Jack knew where they had to go. The Central Command Core. If there were more answers, more records of what they had done to him, it would be there. Varrock led the way through the wreckage, his heavy footfalls echoing through the corridors. Fires burned in the walls. Sparks rained down from ruptured cables. Jack ignored the chaos. He needed to know the whole truth. The command core's door was sealed, thick, reinforced metal. But Varrock didn't slow down. With a mighty roar, he slammed his claws into the control panel, tearing it apart. The door hissed open. They stepped inside. Jack's breath caught. The room was lined with massive data servers, their screens displaying shifting lines of alien code. A central terminal pulsed with energy, its surface smooth and cold. And there, in the center of the room, was something Jack hadn't expected. A human. A woman, bound to a medical chair, wires running into her temples. Her white lab coat was stained with dried blood. Her face was pale, her body unmoving. Varrock narrowed his eyes. Impossible. Jack's heart pounded. He knew that face. Dr. Evelyn Carter. His mother. Or the woman who had created him. The ghost of the past. Jack took a step forward, his throat dry. She's alive. Varrock examined the machinery. Barely. She has been kept in stasis. Jack stared at her. The woman who had written the logs. The woman who had experimented on him. His fingers twitched toward his rifle. He should hate her, but she was the only one left who could tell him the truth. Jack moved to the console, searching for a way to wake her. His fingers hesitated over the controls. Then her eyes fluttered open. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then, in a hoarse whisper, she said the words that made Jack's blood turn to ice. "I tried to save you." Jack's breath caught. "Save me? You?" His voice shook with anger. "You experimented on me." Her expression twisted in pain. "I had no choice. They wanted to kill you. I hid the truth. But Reynolds, he found out. That's why he tried to erase you." Jack clenched his fists. "Then why didn't you stop them?" A tear slipped down her cheek. "Because I was already a prisoner." Jack's mind raced. Everything was collapsing. Nothing made sense. His entire identity was a lie. And then, the final shocking truth. Dr. Carter exhaled, her voice barely audible. "You are not the only one." Jack's blood ran cold. "What?" Her eyes flickered to the terminal. Jack turned. On the screen, a list of names appeared. Project Genesis subjects, 1 to 20. Status: terminated, except for one name. Subject 18. Location unknown. Jack's breath stopped. There was another. A second hybrid. One who was still alive. The enemy you cannot see. Before Jack could react, an explosion tore through the ship. A shockwave of fire and shrapnel ripped through the walls, sending him flying. He hit the ground hard, pain flaring through his ribs. The alarm screamed. The ship was breaking apart. Varrock grabbed his arm. "We need to move." Jack's mind reeled. Another one. Another hybrid. Like him. Who were they? Where were they? And most importantly, whose side were they on? Jack stumbled to his feet, his heart hammering. He had more questions than ever. But only one thing was certain. This war wasn't just between humans and Axalzur anymore. Something else was coming. Something just like him. The ultimate betrayal. The ship was dying. Metal groaned, fire raged through shattered corridors, and the deep hum of the failing reactor pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Jack Carter sprinted down the flickering hallway, his mind racing faster than his feet. Another hybrid. He could barely process it. Subject 18. The only other survivor of Project Genesis. Somewhere out there, another half-human, half-Axalzur existed. Another person who had been engineered, betrayed, and abandoned. And if they were alive, were they friend or foe? The thought haunted him. But there was no time for answers now. Behind him, General Varrock ran with Dr. Evelyn Carter slung over his shoulder. The scientist's pale face was weak, but her eyes flickered open every few seconds. She was alive. For now. Ahead of them, the exit loomed. The launch bay. Their only way out. Then, a gunshot. Jack barely had time to react. The bullet whizzed past his head, slamming into the metal wall beside him. Sparks exploded in his face. He skidded to a stop, rifle raised. A squad of Earth Marines blocked the launch bay doors, their weapons trained on him. Their blue visors reflected the flickering fires behind him. Their leader stepped forward, gripping a sidearm with a serrated combat knife attached beneath the barrel. Jack's stomach turned to ice. Commander Darius Reynolds. The man who had stabbed him on Outpost 47. The man who would try to erase him. The man who had known the truth all along. Reynolds looked him over, then smirked. Carter. Alive and kicking. His gaze flicked to Varrock. And running with the enemy. Guess I was right about you. Jack tightened his grip on his rifle. Cut the crap. You knew what I was. Reynolds chuckled, shaking his head. I knew what you were supposed to be. He gestured with his pistol. And what you were supposed to be was dead. Jack's muscles tensed. Why? His voice was low, dangerous. Reynolds sighed, like a disappointed father. Because you weren't meant to exist. Jack's breath caught. Reynolds stepped forward. His voice was calm, cold, measured. You think Earth's military would just create a hybrid soldier and let him run free? You were a prototype, Carter. A mistake. And when we realized you couldn't be controlled, we did the only thing we could. Jack's heartbeat roared in his ears. You lied to me. My whole life. We let you be a soldier, Reynolds interrupted. We let you fight for something bigger than yourself. But you were always living on borrowed time. Jack's hands shook. His pulse hammered. Reynolds aimed his gun at Jack's chest, right at his heart, the same place he had stabbed him before. No more running, Reynolds said. You belong in the grave. The breaking point. Jack's body moved before his mind could catch up. He dove to the side, just as Reynolds pulled the trigger. The gunshot roared through the air. The bullet barely missed him, shattering the glass console behind him. Varrock was already charging, a blur of black armor and claws. The Earth Marines opened fire. A storm of bullets and plasma bolts filled the air. Jack rolled behind cover, his back slamming against a metal crate. His mind raced. Reynolds had never planned to let him live. This whole time, the moment he was created, he had been marked for death. Jack gritted his teeth. Not today. No more running. No more obeying orders. No more following a lie. Jack stood and fought. He unleashed hell. His plasma rifle spat blue fire, tearing through armor. He moved like a ghost, dodging bullets, striking fast. His body reacted instinctively, unnaturally. Stronger, faster, not human. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He was something else. Varrock tore through the Marines, his claws slicing through armor. Blood splattered the floor. Jack grabbed a Marine by the collar, slamming him into the wall before driving his rifle butt into the man's skull. Reynolds watched from a distance, unmoving, studying him, as if testing him. Jack's breathing was ragged. His muscles burned. His heart pounded. Then, more footsteps. A new squad stormed in. He was outnumbered. Again. And then, Dr. Carter's voice. Weak, but urgent. "Jack," she gasped. "There's something I need to tell you." Jack turned. Her trembling hand reached toward him. "It's about Subject 18. Jack's breath stopped. The entire world froze. Then, a gunshot. Jack watched in horror as Dr. Carter's body jerked backward, a bullet hole blooming in her chest. She collapsed, blood spilling onto the floor. Jack turned. Reynolds stood there, gun smoking, expression unreadable. "She talked too much," he said simply. Something inside Jack snapped, becoming the monster. A roar ripped from his throat. Not a human sound. Not anymore. Something deep, something primal. The Excelsior side of him awakened. Jack lunged. Reynolds barely had time to react before Jack slammed into him, sending them both crashing through the control panel. Sparks erupted around them. Jack's fists came down like hammers. Again. And again. And again. He felt bone crack. Felt blood splatter his knuckles. Reynolds choked on his own breath, struggling against Jack's relentless fury. "Jack," he gasped, blood dribbling from his lips. "You're proving me right." Jack froze. Reynolds coughed, his grin stained with red. "Look at yourself. Look what you've become." Jack's breath shook. His hands trembled. He looked down. Reynolds' face was unrecognizable, broken, bloodied. Jack's fingers were curled like claws. He wasn't just fighting like the Excelsior anymore. He was becoming them. The final choice. The ship shook violently. The hull was collapsing. Varrock grabbed Jack's shoulder. "We must go. Now." Jack's chest rose and fell. His mind was in pieces. Reynolds was barely alive. One last punch would end it. One final hit. Jack raised his fist. Then, a whisper in his mind. "If you kill him, you are no better than them." Jack's hand shook. He exhaled, stepped back, and walked away. The final battle. Jack Carter had always thought of himself as human. A soldier. A protector of Earth. A man who followed orders, no matter how impossible. But now, standing on the burning wreckage of the Excelsior warship, watching the Earth fleet prepare its final strike, he realized something terrifying. He wasn't human. Not fully. Not anymore. And the final battle wasn't just for survival. It was for his soul. The escape. The ship was breaking apart. Fires raged through its corridors, thick smoke curling against the flickering emergency lights. Sparks rained from shattered ceiling panels. Every few seconds, another explosion shook the hull, the force throwing debris in all directions. Jack staggered forward, his breath ragged, his mind a storm of emotions. Behind him, Varrock kept pace, moving with the calmness of a warrior who had faced death too many times to fear it. At Jack's feet, Commander Reynolds lay bleeding, barely conscious. The man who had orchestrated Jack's entire life. The man who had tried to erase him. Jack clenched his fists. He should have finished him. But if he had, he wouldn't be Jack Carter anymore. He'd be something else. Something Earth feared. Something that Excelsior worshipped. A monster. "We have to go," Varrock said, urgency creeping into his usually steady voice. "The ship won't last another 5 minutes." Jack didn't move. His gaze was locked on Reynolds. His commander, his executioner, was still breathing. "Leave him," Varrock muttered. "He deserves to die here." Jack's chest tightened. He knew that. He should have agreed. But something held him back. Maybe it was his last shred of humanity. Maybe it was something worse. With a growl, Jack grabbed Reynolds' collar and threw him over his shoulder. Varrock's red eyes widened. "Are you insane?" Jack ignored him. "Let's move." The general muttered something in Salzer under his breath, but didn't argue. Together, they sprinted toward the launch bay. One last ship remained, their only way out. Behind them, the Earth fleet's cannons began to fire. The warship shuddered as its armor ripped apart. They had seconds left. Earth's final strike. As soon as Jack and Varrock burst into the launch bay, enemy fire erupted. A final squad of Earth Marines stood between them and the last Salzer fighter. Their weapons blazed, bullets and plasma rounds tearing through the air. Jack barely had time to react before Varrock was already moving. The general charged like a beast unleashed. His massive form ripped through the soldiers, claws flashing, armor cracking under his blows. Blood painted the walls. Jack raised his plasma rifle and fired without hesitation. One soldier fell, then another. He wasn't fighting for Earth anymore. He wasn't fighting for the Salzer either. He was fighting to live. The last Marine aimed his rifle at Jack's chest. Too slow. Jack grabbed the man's gun mid-shot, twisted his wrist, and snapped his arm like a twig. The Marine collapsed, screaming. The bay fell silent. Jack didn't look back. He ran. The Salzer fighter roared to life, engines flaring as the launch pad's doors slowly peeled open, revealing the void of space. Jack threw Reynolds' limp body into a seat, strapped him in, then dove into the pilot's chair. Varrock slammed into the co-pilot's seat. "You can fly this thing." Jack gritted his teeth. "Guess we're about to find out." The warship's core finally detonated. The force ripped through the bay, fire and debris consuming everything. Jack slammed the thrusters forward. The ship lurched, metal groaning against the pressure. Then, they were free. The fighter shot through the launch bay doors, just as the entire warship collapsed in on itself. Jack barely had time to breathe. Because waiting for them was Earth's fleet. Dozens of warships, all turning their cannons toward them. They weren't escaping. They were flying straight into a death trap. The broadcast. "Incoming transmission," Varrock said, scanning the console. A voice boomed through the ship's speakers. "Jack Carter, stand down. We will not ask again." Jack gritted his teeth. They still thought he was a traitor, a rogue soldier who had turned against his own kind. Maybe he had, but Earth wasn't innocent either. They had created him, used him, then discarded him like a failed experiment. Jack exhaled slowly. Then, before Varrock could stop him, he reached toward the console and activated the universal broadcast system. "This is Jack Carter," he said, his voice steady. Across the entire Earth fleet, his voice echoed. "I know what I am now. I know what you tried to do to me. You made me. You experimented on me. You built a soldier, then tried to erase him when he wouldn't follow orders." Silence. The entire fleet was listening. Jack glanced at Reynolds, still unconscious. He clenched his fists. "But here's the truth you don't want anyone to hear." He turned to Varrock and nodded. The general pressed a button, and the files appeared. All of them. Project Genesis, Subject 17, Subject 18. The classified data spilled across the fleet's main channels. The truth was out. Earth's government had been exposed. Jack leaned back in his seat, watching the chaos unfold on the scanners. Finally, he exhaled. "You want me dead? Come and try." The future unwritten. The fleet hesitated. For the first time, they weren't sure. Jack had done the one thing they never expected. He had taken control of his own fate. Varrock glanced at him. "What now, human?" Jack stared at the endless stretch of space ahead, at the warships that might still fire on them, at the future that was still unwritten. His old life was gone. His new life, that was up to him. Jack's grip on the controls tightened. We disappear, and with that, he slammed the thrusters and vanished into the stars, rewriting destiny. The silence of space stretched around them like an endless abyss. Jack Carter gripped the controls of the Salzer fighter, his knuckles white. His heart pounded, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Behind them, the Earth fleet stood frozen in uncertainty. The truth was out. The classified files of Project Genesis, the experiments, the betrayals, the cover-ups, had been broadcasted across every Earth warship. And now, they didn't know what to do. For the first time in his life, Jack was truly free. But freedom came at a cost. Where do you go when both of your worlds want you dead? The aftermath of betrayal. Jack didn't look back. He couldn't. Varrock's voice rumbled beside him. We should have been shot down by now. Jack exhaled, staring at the radar. The Earth warships still had their weapons locked on them. They could fire at any second. They're afraid, Jack murmured. Varrock let out a low growl. Then we should leave before they remember how to be brave. Jack hesitated. What would happen now? Would Earth deny everything? Would they hunt him? Would the public believe him or call him a liar? It didn't matter anymore. Jack's entire life had been defined by war, by duty, by loyalty to a cause that never truly belonged to him. Now, that was over. Jack's grip on the controls tightened. Hold on. The fighter's thrusters ignited, launching them into the darkness. Subject 18. For hours, they drifted through space, avoiding patrols, slipping through uncharted territory. Jack didn't speak. His mind raced. Subject 18. It haunted him. Another like him. Another hybrid experiment that had survived. His whole life, he had been told he was alone. A failed project. A mistake that shouldn't exist. But now, someone else was out there. Thinking about them. Varrock asked. Jack glanced at him. The Excelsior warrior sat across from him, arms crossed, watching him carefully. Jack nodded. They could be anywhere, he muttered, and we have no idea if they're on our side. Varrock tilted his head slightly. Perhaps you should ask yourself another question, human. Jack raised an eyebrow. What's that? Varrock's red eyes gleamed. What if they are not running? Jack froze. The thought hadn't even occurred to him. What if Subject 18 was waiting for him? Or worse, what if they were looking for him? A chill ran down Jack's spine. Then we need to find them first, he said, voice firm. Varrock smirked. Finally, a decision I can agree with. Jack adjusted the ship's course. If Subject 18 was out there, he would find them. Before they found him. The signal. Days passed. Jack and Varrock moved through uncharted space, staying off the radars of both Earth and the Salzer. They made brief stops on abandoned space stations, gathering supplies, trading stolen credits for fuel. But every moment, Jack was restless. Something was coming. And then the signal came. A distress beacon. Weak. Scrambled. Faint. But undeniably human. Jack and Varrock stood over the cockpit console, staring at the repeating message. Transmission 764 active. Emergency SIGNAL DETCTED. Origin. Unknown CCTR. Jack's pulse quickened. Could it be them? Varrock folded his arms. A trap? Maybe, Jack admitted. But if it's not? Varrock nodded. Then it is the only lead we have. Jack took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. Let's go. He punched in the coordinates. And the ship jumped into the unknown. The lost colony. The moment the fighter exited hyperspace, Jack knew something was wrong. A massive wreckage field floated in the void. Ruined ships, shattered space stations, drifting bodies. The debris was scattered across the system, silent tombstones of a forgotten battle. Jack's stomach twisted. Whatever happened here? Varrock muttered. It was not recent. Jack scanned the readings. The beacon was still active. And then, something moved. Not wreckage, not a ship, something alive. Jack leaned forward. A small station, barely operational, hidden within the debris. That's where the signal is coming from, Jack said. Varrock checked his weapons. Then let us see what is waiting for us. Jack guided the fighter toward the station. As they docked, he felt it again. That uneasy feeling, like something was watching him. The truth unveiled. The air inside the station was stale, metallic, and cold. Jack and Varrock moved through the dimly lit corridors, weapons drawn. The station had power, but barely. Flickering lights and malfunctioning doors made it feel more like a tomb than a shelter. Then they reached the command center. And Jack's world shifted again. A figure stood in the center of the room. Tall, asterisk, muscular, human, asterisk, but not quite. Their eyes glowed faintly, the same way Jack's did in the dark. Jack's heart pounded. Subject 18, he whispered. The figure turned and smirked. Nice of you to finally show up, they said. Jack's fingers twitched toward his weapon. Varrock growled lowly. Who are you? The figure stepped closer. Their face was sharp, angular, a mixture of human and something else. Something powerful. They cocked their head, studying Jack. I've been waiting for you, Subject 18 said. Their voice was calm, controlled. Too controlled. Jack's instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. You sent the distress signal, Jack asked. A slow nod. I wanted you to find me. Jack exhaled. Why? Subject 18 smiled. Because, Jack, we have work to do. Jack's stomach twisted. His pulse pounded in his ears. What did that mean? Before he could speak, Subject 18 raised a hand. Jack's body locked up. Every muscle froze in place. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Power, raw, undeniable power was pressing down on him. Subject 18's eyes gleamed. You don't even know what you are yet, do you? They whispered. Jack struggled against the invisible force. Subject 18 smiled wider. Don't worry. I'll teach you. Then, darkness.